Good afternoon and welcome to our change of zone meeting. And we will go to the first application, New Homes Holding Corp., TC 5416. I would ask the town clerk to please read the hearing notice.
Certainly. DC 5416, New Homes Holdings Corp. Application requests a change of zone from Residence B District and Industrial District to all Residence CA District in order to construct 16 townhouses. A landscaping relaxation may be required as this part of this application. The environmental impacts will also be assessed on this property. The property is located in the Islip School District on the north side of Union Boulevard, approximately 308 feet west of Grant Avenue in Islip, Town of Islip, Suffolk County, New York. Islip Town Board, Olga Murray, Town Clerk.
Thank you, Olga. If the applicant would please come forward.
Good evening, board. Albert Monarov, president of New Home Holdings, located in 1713 Fifth Avenue, second floor, Bayshore, New York, 11706.
Could you repeat your name, please?
Albert Monarov.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Today we're asking board to change of zone from business residence and industrial one to zoning CA to build 16 new townhouses on Union Boulevard.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments for the applicant at this point before we hear from the department?
No.
Okay. All right, you may have a seat, and I'd ask Sean if he would come forward and maybe review this a little bit for us from the department's perspective.
Thank you, Supervisor Carpenter, members of the board. As stated by the applicant, this project proposes about 16 non-age restricted townhouses. This is actually the first such proposal for these types of townhouses in about 18 years for the town. This would remove the industrial zoning near the existing residences, which is generally a better type of neighbor when residents abut residents. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has approved the wetlands permit, keeping all development 50 feet away from the wetlands to the west. All the units will have solar power, and 2 units are affordable by code. If the zoning board grants a density variance allowing the applicant to go from 12 units to 16 units, the total number of affordable units will be 4 by covenant. The staff is awaiting a final determination from the Suffolk County Planning Commission. We would advise that the board reserve decision tonight
Okay.
until we get that decision.
All right. Are there any questions for the department at this point?
Yes, so Sean, the wetland has been taken care of because I know there's a set distance between the wetlands and the actual structures, right?
Yeah,
Is it satisfying
it's
that?
more complex than that, but generally we defer to the DEC for the environmental specific matters as to the impacts of the wetlands and stuff like that. Because of the wetlands, it eats into the overall yield the applicant would otherwise normally be entitled to. But since the DEC is okay with it, and the applicant is willing to provide 2 more affordable ownership units, the staff saw no objection to him asking for a little more yield, because if not for the wetlands, he would have been entitled to actually, I think, 28 units.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so since we're waiting for word from the county, we'll make a motion to reserve decision.
Close the public hearing and reserve.
Make a second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is recessed then. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, the next is TC 5417, EDG Sunbelt Mall LLC. Madam Clerk, if you would please read the hearing notice.
TC 5417, EDG Sunvet LLC. Applicant requests a change of zone from Industrial Corridor District and Corridor District to Business 3 and a modification of covenants associated with TC 2194 in order to reconstruct an existing mall with 6 pad sites. Applicant further requests 2 special board permits for 2 fast food restaurants, a planning board special permit for a restaurant, and 3 planning board special permits for a drive-through window for a bank pursuant to section 68-302G, 68-302(1)H, and 68-302.1M, respectively, for a drive-through window, respectively. A landscaping relaxation may be required as part of this application, and the environmental impacts will also be assessed on this property located in the Sachem School District on the northeast corner of Sunrise Highway Service Road and Broadway Avenue, Holbrook, Town of Islip, Suffolk County, New York, Town Board, Islip, Olga Murray, Town Clerk.
Thank you, Olga. You may begin. Good evening.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Carpenter, members of the board. My name is Anthony Guardino, and I represent BDG Sunvet LLC, which is seeking the relief that the clerk just mentioned. I would also point out, I don't think I requested a modification of covenants associated with TC 2194. That's also a part of the relief that we're seeking from the town board. I have with me today Chris Robinson, a civil engineer with R&M Engineering, Wayne Muller, a traffic engineer from R&M Engineering, and several representatives with BDG Sunvet. BDG recently acquired a 99-year ground lease over the Sunvet Mall property in Holbrook. You're all familiar with the mall. It's about 280,000 square feet. It was constructed about 50 years ago. In better times, the mall, as you recall, was anchored by a 60,000 square foot Pathmark supermarket and a 100,000 square foot Toys R Us. There are now just very few tenants in the mall, in the shopping center, and it's currently on life support. So BDG is looking to reposition the property by, I guess the word is demalling it, reducing its overall size by about 100,000 square feet and developing a variety of restaurant, retail, and bank pads spread across the property. As you will see from the Exhibit 6 in your booklet, it has the color renderings. You'll see that the tired old facade, the existing mall building, will receive a long overdue, fresh new look as part of the redevelopment. I'm happy to report that there is a great interest already, has been shown by retailers, restaurants, medical uses, and banks. BDG currently has leases out already to Starbucks and Citibank, and is well along in the process with a national supermarket chain that will likely anchor the center. The mall was originally zoned B3, and then several years ago, I think it was inadvertently rezoned part of it was inadvertently rezoned for the ICD, the Industrial Corridor District along Vets Highway, and that made the site non-conforming because it doesn't allow the shopping center to be there, the retail uses. I want to mention that the planning board originally heard this application in November 2022, and the application was generally well received, but there were some concerns expressed by the board about site access and internal site circulation. Following that hearing, we met with Planning Commissioner D'Oconole and Mr. Colgan, who shared their thoughts on how the site plan could be modified to address the planning board's concerns. Those modifications were incorporated in the site plan that you have in your book before you. And then on February 8th, the planning board unanimously voted to recommend approval of the change of zone, granted the special permits that were needed from the planning board and the site plan relaxations. And the planning board also proposed some conditions and covenants, which my client reviewed and found to be acceptable. So that's the end of my presentation. I do have the experts here if the board would like to hear. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Guardino. At this point, does anyone have any questions?
Just a couple.
Certainly.
So BDG is the Blumenfeld Group, right? So we're familiar with their work in Deer Park at the Tanger Center. And are they also the Tanger out in Riverhead? No. Okay, but this type of location and space developed into a mall is something that they've done before, and we've got evidence of it very close to you.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And again, this is really demalling it. This is like the opposite of what they're doing. So they're getting rid of
Well, with the 6 pad sites,
6 pad sites. Very familiar with that, right? They have done.
you know, making it all sort of walkable, similar to what we see in Deer Park. And thanks.
Anyone else have any questions? Certainly.
Are these pads that are there 5 pads that are being suggested?
If I can call up the engineer. Just want to just address that. I know that the number has changed from what we originally, or we moved pieces around, I should say.
Okay.
And that's going to be my next question is, are you going to be fluid in moving certain, because we have issues now with drive-throughs and traffic. Go ahead.
Absolutely. We can hear you.
So we have 6 pad locations that surround property. I'm going to start in the northwest corner. We have a retail building facing the mall, which will have a shared parking lot in between that building and what's to the left of the Sun Vet Mall, taking down the entire east west end of the mall, which used to house a Crickles. That will all be removed. About 100,000 feet off.
I don't mean to interrupt you. That first pad site is noted on the site plan as proposed retail divisible. So those are meant to be several different retail locations, all in one pad site facing the mall.
Exactly. Storefronts that will face the mall. It'll be a mixture of both wet retail, dry retail, releasing fast casual food or nail salon or other items that fit in a typical shopping center. Small stores as part of the overall complex involved. Just south of that, we have a restaurant with a drive-through and again a little bit of additional retail, breaking the building through along the drive-through around the building. Southwest corner here along the hard corner, we have a small bank. The area is just east of that is a Starbucks. This is a very unique Starbucks. It's a new concept for them. It's a double drive-through. There is no seating. There is no walk-up. No customers go into the building at all. We call it double drive-through on one side, which has the full 12-car queue around the outside. It's a traditional drive-through with the menu boards. You order it, you pick up your product when you get to the window. The other window on the other side of the building is a short queue. We call a rapid pickup lane. Everybody's got an app for that. You order your coffee with an app, you send it in, you get a notice that it's ready, you pull in, you're ready for the queue. First, your coffee's ready, they hand it to you. The monetary transactions already happened. There's no interaction at that point other than picking up the product. If you're a little aggressive and you get there too early before you got your notice that it's ready, we provide several spaces just south of that drive-through, which are actually painted and there's a sign in front of them. So you can pull up onto those spaces, wait for your name to pop up on the board in front, and then pull into the queue and pull right up. So it's looking for a nice fast transaction. Just to the east of the main drive out the Sunrise Highway, another small bank pad. We don't have the name on it yet. The lease is out, has been executed at this days. Guardino mentioned Citibank, they're located in the building here, of course, the far east end of the site. We also have retail and a dental office. The old Half-Mart building remains pretty much intact, but it's being reconfigured. The large box in the middle would be the supermarket, National Supermarket. We also have some smaller retail.
So after all is said and done, this actually, if I remember correctly, will be smaller than what is there now. Okay. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments while the engineer is up here and the applicant's still up here? Or Mr. Guardino is up here? All right, why don't we hear from Sean?
Thank you. There's not too much more for the department to add. Clearly, this represents an opportunity to revitalize the struggling mall, and the location on Sunrise Highway is preferred for this mix of uses and the level of traffic something like this would generate. But unfortunately, again, the staff is awaiting a final determination from the Suffolk County Planning Commission, and we advise that the board reserve any decision on this tonight.
Okay.
I just
So-
want to note,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, may I?
Sure.
I just want to note, Sean, in terms of the covenants and restrictions, with respect to operational restrictions number 4, that seems to be a standard covenant that we're putting in as it relates to drive-throughs.
That is correct.
You know, I bring it up repeatedly. I apologize for doing so, but we have seen some problems at one of our Starbucks with the drive-through operation. So I think this is very helpful, because if we have those problems, we can bring the applicant back
Mhm.
and address those.
Okay. All right. So since we have to wait for the county, we will make a motion to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Motion by Councilman Cochran, second by Councilman Guadron. All those in favor? Opposed? It is reserved. Thank you. Okay, we will continue now with the decision item on the agenda. The Global Team LLC TC 5394. I'd ask the planning department to come forward. I know there have been some meetings that have taken place, some issues being addressed, and would like a status on where we are with everything.
Sure. So,
Sure.
board,
Wait one moment and let the room kind of clear.
so the board recalls two of the chief concerns raised at the public hearing were of the church's access to the parking, as well as the impacts to the fire department and their response times. So the applicant did conduct a parking study in that Smith Avenue municipal lot on a typical Sunday, and they noted that this church, presumably the church occupies about 22 of those spots. So given that there'd be a license, if the board approves this, for 28 spots for the apartment building, there would be, sufficient parking for the church for its everyday Sunday business. So that doesn't seem to be as much of a concern. Planning staff did meet with the ISA Fire Department to address potential parking abuse and conflicts from future tenants of the proposed apartment building. In light of that, we've added the following covenants, limiting the restaurant hours to 12 o'clock midnight. Yes. Sure. Of the restaurant to 12 midnight. The proposed hours in the covenants are 7 a.m. to 12 a.m. So you wouldn't be allowed to be open from 12 a.m. to 7 a.m. overnight. The applicant has agreed to put in their leases that would prohibit on-street parking on Smith Avenue, as well as no parking in the fire department lot. They've agreed to install privacy and sound attenuating construction for the building, including the windows. And as advised by the applicant, most of the tenants will not be along the east and south side where closest to the fire department. It's passive recreational areas or a corridor, so hopefully they won't be hearing as much noise. But again, these types of tenants should be expecting some level of noise living in a downtown environment, and the fire department has always been there.
This was in response to the concerns raised by the fire department?
Fire department, correct.
Okay. And that would be in the covenants.
It's in the covenants, correct.
Continue.
The applicant will extend that turnout area along Smith Avenue for picking up and dropping off, adding a third car. They can fit that. So that would hopefully cut down on any double parking or any congestion, getting to and from the building. And they've also agreed in tandem with the Division of Traffic Safety to add striping and parking restrictions on Smith Avenue to deter parking that could potentially interfere with the fire department's operations.
I had heard there was an issue raised about a bus stop. Or was that,
They did, so yes, the fire department did bring up concerns about the bus stop's proximity to Smith Avenue. It is right in front of the currently vacant movie theater. We had advised, the applicant has agreed to reach out to Suffolk County Transit to see if the bus stop could be relocated elsewhere. I also advised the fire department that they should voice their concerns specifically, because me personally, I would think that safety would be paramount. If a bus is interfering with fire response,
Mhm.
I would hope that the county would accommodate that request. So
is there a shelter at that stop or is
There
it
is.
just a stop?
there is a shelter that would have to be relocated.
And I would assume that, that, can we add that to the covenants, that that would be something that we're making a commitment or that the developer would be making a commitment to pursue with the county?
We have done that in the past, so staff would have no objection to that.
And would the department be supportive of working with them? Because obviously you agree that that's probably not an appropriate area for the stop.
I would trust the fire department on that, so yes, we would have no problem reaching out to Suffolk County Transit directly.
Okay. You may continue, or are you done?
Yeah, that basically sums it up. That's,
One more
Go ahead.
thing, I think, Mayor.
Oh, absolutely.
There was, and I don't think it's been addressed between the public hearing and tonight. There were further negotiations, as I understand it, with the applicant as it relates to, and I forget what we call it. I know there's a name that we call
Impact fee.
impact fee.
oh, yes, I apologize. Yes.
So one of the things that came up at the public hearing was the idea that we, meaning the town, might need to either restripe, reconfigure, or perhaps add another row of parking at 401 Main, which would be a cost to the town. And that would allow for some spillover parking if a parking issue, and I know the applicant does not think a parking issue will develop. I know that's their position. But if it were to develop, that would perhaps address that. And so at one point, what was, I think at the last hearing, there was a number that was being suggested, and that number has increased. So just,
Yes. So the original number that the applicant agreed to pay as a mitigation fee, I think, was $34,500. They've increased that sum to $122,000.
Which, if I recall, would be more in keeping with what the cost of creating that parking would be.
Yes, based on available municipal parking, based on the parking that they would otherwise need, but can't provide with the existing layout of their site.
Does anyone have any other questions or
I do.
comments?
I do.
Certainly.
Sean, you've been here for a while. Do you work on the Macy's estate?
Not directly, no.
Is that historic area?
That was given a PLP designation similar to what the
Did we
applicant.
relax parking on that?
I don't know. My guess, I could look it up.
So Sean, you're telling me right now that we're going to plan on something that we have a builder coming in with zero parking, zero. And we're going to change for that one. I mean, I'm hearing from builders all over. They're going to go to Bay Shore saying, I'll make this historic like the our sailors, soldiers memorial. And say, well, no, parking, we'll just, take over the town park lot in the back. I just don't get that we can trade something on the east side of that town and say you have to have 1.2 whatever parking spots and relax it a little so you can get a couple more apartments in there. But on the west side, we can say, don't worry, we'll just put another little slip in by 401 and everything's good to go. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to how other future, I'll say PLP designations would be treated without looking them over. Obviously, these are all looked at on a case-by-case basis. Yes, that applicant acquiring a house and tearing it down and putting in parking was certainly a considerable mitigation. They also are responsible for securing parking, I believe is within 250 feet or 500 feet of that subject apartment building. So, you know, those set of covenants, those conditions were unique to that application. This one, they don't have an opportunity to tear down the fire department or the areas next door to put up their parking. They're relying on the same parking lot that the movie theater was, reliant on, because again, neither use has parking. We're just trying to fit in the box what traffic engineers have said could work. While at the same time, getting some level of mitigation for their impacts. We know they can't provide parking. We know they shouldn't ignore that. And based on, combined effort with Department of Public Works, with the applicant, our traffic engineers, and the planning department, this is the best set of circumstances we can get for repurposing this building if the town desires to salvage it. The applicant did submit a report stating why there's some significance to this building. That's in the town board's packets. That's up to the town board to accept or refuse. But the staff is of the opinion there's enough documentation there to justify at least the request for a PLP designation. How we mitigate it, we've worked months on this. And given a building this size and the hardship associated with redeveloping it, they think this is the best we can come up with in terms of, trying to achieve all those goals.
Sean, I think I showed you that yesterday. A couple of years ago, we spent a lot of money developing a parking program for ICE. And until we get this done and we organize all our lots to make this stuff happen, I can't see going forward because we spent the time and money with doing a parking to move all our assets, to clear some of these parking lots to make it 4 hours, 12 hours, and some like we do in Bay Shore for free for 15 minutes. Plus with the fire department issues, we should take this thing, go back to the drawing board and let the builder sit there and say, okay, here are all the lots there. How are we going to improve? Because right now, this is not what the plan we came up with. We spent a lot of time to level G. It doesn't make sense with this project.
Sean, you said that there have been a lot of meetings and time spent, months on this application, making modifications and getting commitments. What the existing parking lot to the south and west of this parcel, the municipal parking lot, what are the plans for that? What shape is it in now, and what commitments have been made to change that?
I think it's been acknowledged it's in fairly deplorable shape.
Deplorable, is that the word you
Yes.
used?
It needs repaving, it needs restriping. It currently doesn't have any controlled access into and out of it, which is generally a safety concern. Whenever we receive an application for an older site that has that, say, such as a gas station, it's always been the town's expectation that some level of curbing be put in there because it's not safe for someone to just pull in and out of a lot whenever they please. So the applicant, on their dime, would be improving the lot, making all the spaces in there usable because some of it is not usable now with the flooding. They'll be adding decorative streetlights. They'll be adding a raised median along the front of the lot. So again, there's controlled ingress and egress to those parking spots. And again, just making it overall functional because now there's certain parts of that lot you probably wouldn't want to park in.
I think what was represented by the applicant at the public hearing, where they submitted an exhibit for the reconfiguration and rebuild of Lot 5, was a cost estimate of $372,738 at the applicant's expense to redo Lot 5, so as to allow for an opportunity for the tenants to park in that location. Wasn't there also some discussion, as I recall, about some sort of a sticker or some sort of an opportunity for the tenants to use that lot?
Yeah, so right now in the covenants, there's a requirement that the applicant secure a license agreement with the town attorney's office, allowing them for the overnight use of that lot up to 28 spaces,
And how many spaces will the lot have total?
50.
So 28 for the applicant and at max,
Mhm.
and 22 always available to the public.
Correct.
I have a question, Sean,
Certainly, go ahead.
if I may.
Mhm.
Does the Islip Fire Department favors or opposes this project? It's not clear here on the writing.
In my discussions with them, I don't speak for the fire department, but they had indicated they weren't going to take a stance on whether they were for or against it.
Now, what would happen if we went forward with the project and then the fire department finds out that there is something that they're not really happy with? What will happen at that moment in time?
Well, if someone's violating the law, they could reach out to public safety or the Suffolk County Police Department. If they are in violation of a covenant that's in here, it would be addressed by the planning department, and we would go through the motions of bring it to the planning board and this board, try to revisit it, possibly reduce some of their zoning entitlements, possibly impose additional covenants. So, there's an enforcement mechanism in place, but, we'd have to wait and see. Currently, there's no parking allowed on Smith Avenue. That was confirmed by the Division of Traffic Safety, and that's their preferred method of regulating the stretch of Smith Avenue for now.
And I'm sorry, so on the east side of Smith Avenue, there's no parking, but we were going to intend to reinforce that by putting striping in places.
Right.
So there won't only be signage that says no parking. Could we also put signage up that says no stopping or standing?
We could, that would be up to Division of Traffic Safety. Like I said, I reached out to them regarding these mitigations in place. Their preferred means of regulating it would be no parking now, but obviously this board controls the traffic controls. So if that's something the board would want to see directly explored by the Division of Traffic Safety, if this moves forward tonight, staff will reach out to them and
And the three-car
Okay.
cutout that is proposed by the applicant on the east side of Smith Street, that is intended for the residents of the proposed development.
right. I mean, that was my intention when it was suggested. I don't know if we would necessarily be concerned with prohibiting various users. I mean, in the covenants right now, it says that they already put up a sign that's restricted to 15 minutes.
I'm sorry,
15 minutes.
15.
To stay there, yes.
Okay, because I'd be concerned that with the restaurant use there, folks from the restaurant were coming to use the cutout area. So is that something that we could address through a covenant?
We can add in the covenants if we want to prohibit restaurant uses or like
So
delivery
not
drivers.
the
stuff like
restaurant
that.
use. Exclusive for that cutout would be for the resident. As I understood it, it was meant to be for the residents to either drop off or pick up, or perhaps bring in their groceries or whatever it was that they would need to do at the location. I don't think it was ever intended to be part of a valet service or anything
Wasn't.
like that for the restaurant.
It wasn't. We could certainly tighten up that covenant, strictly limiting it to residents of the building.
That makes sense. That's a good point.
If I may,
Certainly,
another question, please.
certainly.
Sean, now, I understand that Lot 5 will dedicate 28 parking stalls for the residents of this project, correct?
Let me just clarify, it's not dedicated to them, it's available to them.
Or
It
available
would be
to them.
non-exclusive.
All right, and where are the other 50 parking spots supposed to be allocated?
That's part of the mitigation fee, so $122,000 would be used by the town to develop or improve parking elsewhere in downtown Islip. Or one could be a potential landing area, but we haven't exhausted, I think, all possibilities of where parking could end up being. But that's acknowledging that they're not providing all their parking, even though the traffic and parking study indicated there was adequate parking within walking distance of the apartment building. But that $122,000 will go towards some to be determined location to improve parking in downtown Islip.
Sean, if I might. This building, we're looking at it, this rendering of what it's projected to be like. I wish we had a picture of what it looks like now. What are the possible uses, if this were not to go forward, what were the possible uses for something like this?
I would actually defer to the architect, but it's not a building that's easily, adapted, given its size and bulk.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the depiction that I see with what's envisioned for the apartments, it almost kind of looks like it's still the movie theater.
Yeah,
You know,
it's kinda
which
the
is,
intent.
is kind of cool, and it's reminiscent of what was done at the other end of town with the old Masonic Lodge that was converted into apartments. When you pass by, it still has that look of the downtown and an old building with some charm and character. Could it possibly be converted into like a warehouse or
That would be difficult
storage use or something like that if this were not to go forward?
because there's no parking or like drive aisle for that type of use. It would be difficult to readapt it as that because you'd be probably compromising the fire department even more than any other use would be. The other thing is, departments don't generate a lot of parking per square foot. So if you're talking about alternative uses, which might potentially be viable in a downtown, such as an office, that would require more parking than the applicant's proposal tonight. So there's only so many different uses you can really realistically convert this to. And again, that's just talking about external impacts. I can't even fathom what, how the internal construction would be.
Councilman Guadron made reference to the fire department. When you gentlemen met with them and the commissioner, I understand that and I was not available for the meeting, nor would I have been, but some of the concerns were if the fire department has events that, rightfully they're used to being able to do that for years, are they going to start having issues with people in the apartment building? Are there accommodations being made in the lease that anyone going in there would understand you're renting an apartment in a building next to a fire department?
Yes, in the covenants,
Because I remember we had something like that with the building being built over by the rifle range.
rifle range, as well as there was a new house proposed, basically on top of downtown Oakdale. But I'll just call attention to covenant number 8 for this application lease provisions. The applicant agrees to include in all leases language prohibiting tenants from parking in the fire department parking lot on Smith Avenue, except for the municipal lot on the western side. Applicant further agrees to include language that the apartment is located in close proximity to an existing fire department. Residents may be subject to noise that may be heard from that facility 24/7.
Okay.
There'd be an advisory provision in the lease.
Mhm. And with that, in the covenants, certainly our parking enforcement would be motivated to be certain that people are following the rules, so to speak.
I would think so.
The other thing that I remember being raised was something about the windows on the east side of the building
Mhm.
and the south side overlooking the parking lot, that there, might be concerns that people feel compromised by that or noise. What were the accommodations being directed to the developer for that issue?
So right now, it's in covenant 9,
9?
C, D, and E. The applicant shall minimize and/or relocate windows facing the east and south sides to the maximum extent permissible by New York State Building and Fire Codes. Windows and exterior walls shall incorporate sound attenuating materials and best practices to mitigate sound received from the property to the east and south of the subject building. And the window for the fitness room shall incorporate privacy techniques to limit visibility into that facility.
All right, I have no other questions. Does anyone else have
Yeah, I do.
questions or comments? Certainly.
Sean, as you know, being a retired naval officer, as a senior officer, I get briefed a lot in planning and doing things that, you have to look forward and anticipate.
Mhm.
And what you just showed me right now, there's a layer that's happening right now that you're saying, well, the restaurant's only going to have from 7 to 12. What kind of restaurant is it? Is it going to be like a lake house where you're going to have 100 people in the course of a lunchtime and you don't have enough parking there? And then you're saying, we don't enforce. I mean, I'll take you from here when we leave to Bay Shore. We don't enforce any fire lanes. We go to the Stop and Shop. There's cars all up because you know what, right now? Well, there's the DoorDash, the Uber Eats. They're going to come in there and they're going to double park in front of that 3 little spots. And it's common sense. So what you're telling me is that we're going to have apartments, we're going to have people living in those apartments, we're going to have people going to the restaurant. And oh, by the way, there's a fire department because when I go there for meetings, that's the overflow. So when you have a meeting at the base, ICE Fire Department, all the chiefs and all the other, cars are in that lot. Maybe it's once or twice a month or what their training is, but they use that lot. And all of a sudden you start saying 50 spots and this is going to be controlled by signage in front of it. No, because we don't enforce that. Again, that's the town of Islip. You're telling me, oh, no, you're going to enforce it by signs and stripage. Doesn't work. And then it goes back to safety. It goes back to a school bus. It goes back to a fire truck leaving that Smith Street to turn right or left onto Montauk Highway. And that, for me, you have not satisfied that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Okay. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to issue negative declaration and approve the resolution.
Is there a second? All right, I will second the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
For the record, I know that we have a housing crisis and these will mitigate, in a way, that crisis. However, we cannot oversee the safety issues. And by the commitment that they're doing with the firehouse, with the Islip Fire Department, they will, work hand in hand and make sure that there are no safety issues. I vote yes, in favor.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I will say this, that we are looking at our parking enforcement unit that is going to be reinforced. And situations like this, it makes it that much more important that we do reinforce the laws that are there. So having said that,
Voted no.
okay, we have 3 in favor, 1 no. The motion carries. Thank you. There are no other applications before us this evening, so I will make a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? We stand adjourned.